Okay, how smallpox ended racism. It's a strange thing. It's one of those, stick with me kind of things. It can't just be A equals B equals C. But here's how this happens. Most people don't know about smallpox. Smallpox is a disease that was rampant and it killed a lot of people. It was akin to like a bubonic plague type of situation. And the incredibleness of it is that we were able to actually eradicate it. It was actually the first disease ever totally cured by mankind and eradicated, gone, no longer in existence, actually. You look into this, it's amazing. And how we did it too. We actually found that where it came from was a strain of cowpox and or cattle that had affected men and people and gotten broke out from that and went rampant all the way through Egypt and the Levant and into India and back down through and up and into Europe and stuff. And so all the people of that whole area had been previously infected. And so the way this disease works is that once you get infected like that, you kind of become immune to it. It's kind of like mumps. And you should have that antibody, and it carries on with you, and it carries on through your lineage. And you could get it past then, a generation or two past. But if you do, you might get one or two pockmarks. Indeed, the last spawns of it that we saw across the world were people had been the previous inoculated groups of people, maybe thousands of years ago, and then they got it again because they ran into somebody who was rampantly broke out with it when it broke out, and so they got a few pockmarks, but it never really caused too much problems to people that were already previously inoculated. People that weren't, and I don't know if people know, but in America, whenever the first colonists came, we were really just a small shell on the right hand edge, eastern seaboard line, um, basically running from, Florida or up from Florida through the Carolinas all the way up to north. And we indeed grabbed the northern area before we did the south because the south had been grabbed by Spain and France had grabbed the middle area where the Louisiana Purchase was out and so on. So anyhow, whenever the Caucasoid races, the Spaniards and English and French and all that came over, they were, of course, already previously inoculated to this type of thing, but were carriers, of course, and that's how it works too. And so whenever they ran into Indians, instantly we ended up giving them accidentally just by hanging around and breathing and talking on them smallpox. And it ran rampant through them, but not back through us rampantly because we were already immune to it. It's kind of like our kid had already had mumps, so you can watch it go rampant through the neighborhood and your kid don't get it. You know? So it killed off a whole lot of Indians. In fact, truth be known, supposedly some 80-90% of the Indians we never actually got to meet because before we had ever even ventured and done the Lewis and Clark type of things, those people we would have run into had all died of smallpox. And it's kind of sad, but it happened to South America, it happened to North America, it happened everywhere that had never been previously inoculated or was separated and had never experienced it before. And indeed, when we went to some islands and stuff, like, let me see here, there's pictures of when we went to the island nations. Here we go. We went to an island nation, and this is what it'll do to somebody. I mean, it'll literally break you out to this point right here. I mean, it's sad to look at, but I mean, it just welts all over your body. And whether she lives through this or not, because it's attacking all of her internal organs and things. I don't know if you want to look into smallpox, but it's did all that. But hopefully, she lived through that situation. But if she did, or if some group in that group that they ran into that got the smallpox lived through it, then they would be immune to it. And then future generations, if somebody came over that had smallpox even this bad, you possibly could get a couple of dots off of it, but you would never do this and die again. And it had happened. We take it for granted, but there has been a lot of cases of it to where it had happened to people and gotten broke out so bad and just literally killed people here in not too long of a past. In fact, the last case of it, the last remnants of it, they say, were still down in Africa because Africa had never been experienced to it, especially through the Somalian areas and area like that. And this man right here was the last person to ever get smallpox, and he lived through it. And he's got scars all over him. It doesn't show it in this picture, but they have other pictures. They show him like in a false light, and it shows he's got dots all. You can see the one on his neck there, but he's got ones all over him and stuff. When he takes off his shirt, there are dots all over his body. It left pox on him. I don't know if you ever seen anybody that's ever had smallpox or any chicken pox or anything like that, but it leaves a pox. Well, how does that, ruin the slavery type thing that I was talking about? How does that ruin, not ruin, how does that fix racism? How could that possibly fix, racism? Well, you find that these old boats that came in, let's see if this will show up good enough. These old boats that came in, it tells you about these guys to be sold on the Bani Eland. You find that's a Jewish slave ship thing. You find that the Jews were the ones that did the whole slave trade and everything. They actually were the ones that had gotten with the northwestern and western Africans and down all the way through Nigeria, eventually cleaning out part of Africa pretty much. And here he's bringing 250, so quite a few ships of them over at one time. Negroes just arrived from the Windward and Rice Coast. What's that? Well, they used to take them to the South American islands, the St. Croix and the Caribbean islands there. They would take them to islands they had there and let them get over and get smallpox and go through their thing. And then the healthy ones they would bring. And in fact, they would try to show you the smallpox marks on the slaves to show you they've already had it, so you don't have to worry about it. Okay? So, going on with this idea, the utmost care has already been taken and shall be continued to keep them free from left danger of being infected with the smallpox. No boat having been on board, and all communication with people in Charlestown prevented. Down here at the bottom it says full one half of the above Negroes have had the smallpox in their own country. Whenever you discuss, look into this, they had actually had it go back into their own country and break out there so bad. And you're like, well, how could they have had it broke out so bad? Well, whenever the Jewish guys showed up that had already had it before and were carriers, they broke out with it real bad, just like running into the American Indians. And this is your proof that the Africans that were brought over to America were actually never in contact previously with anybody in that entire area of the Levant, through Egypt, India, anywhere through there, or they wouldn't have broke out as bad as they did. It's the way it works. And so the blacks never had contact with anybody before. They had been separated, as the American Indians might as well have been on another continent, like the American Indians. In fact, that's exactly the same way it broke through. In fact, they broke out, which apparently the numbers they come up with, half or more, that's worse numbers than the American Indians or most people that broke out before with it. So it's definitely rampant and definitely a problem with them. And not just one or two pockmarks, but the whole rampant situation, if you look into it. And they go through a bunch of gross descriptions and pustules and boils and all the things describing the pictures and everything off of it. But luckily, this is something we've totally eradicated. And now we can totally eradicate the black Afrocentric view of the Hebrew Israelites, that they were ever Israelites in the first place, because way back 1,000 years or more than 1,000 years before this, anybody who had ever run into this had already gone through it and therefore were the carriers but did not get it. They were the ones that infected the blacks. It shows you they had never been in contact with them before. Right. So that pretty much does it. But let's look at something else. You say, well, the Egyptians, it has to be the Egyptians. They were the Egyptians and stuff. Well, let's look up something here real quick, if it'll let me look up anything real quick.
Stones of fire actually being a reference to divine beings view pretty well. Well, that's not all there is to the passage. When we get into the next chapter, chapter 18,
Egyptian.
You kind of get a little bit of a different angle. So Enoch continues in chapter 18, verse 3 here.
Blonde, red-haired mummies. Because what they have found now is there's a hell of a lot of these mummies they found that are Egyptian, blonde-haired now, all the earliest dynasties. I made a video here about it. They found Yuya, Joseph, he's blonde haired. They said, no, we've taken and soaked the black people's hair, African people's hair, Egyptian people's hair in natron for way more than the 40 days that they actually did the thing into. It actually has no effect on the hair whatsoever. And that, no, they were blonde and yellow haired Egyptians. This lady right here is the one that does the thing. I mean, look at this guy. He looks like Caesar. So what's the deal here? Well, let's look at some of this. The ancient Egyptians are quite often shown as having blonde hair and more Caucasian features. In fact, here it says Caucasian features have been well preserved by the embalming process. And all through the area, you could look at my other videos on this, but they show you all of these mummies. Let me see if I can find this right here. Early pre-dynastic mummies that they have that are all it seems like the mummy's DNA, whenever they check it, seems to be the people from Northern Europe and North America. It's got a little bit of the Russia and China in it, and some into India, but the black people don't have as much, and neither do even the Persians, of the same stuff that it looks like the original Egyptians were, that they were the Egyptians. They came out here, they worked the Levant for a while, and then they came up into Europe and became Europe. Then they moved to North America, and here we are in North America. It's that DNA strand that they have. And I don't know, there's ancient white mummies in Asia that they found now all the way through. And of course, the Egyptians now we found out goes all the way back to the ancient Anunnaki. And the Anunnaki are the Sumerian gods. And of course, everybody's always said, well, the Sumerian gods, they're the Aryan gods, because the Sumerians were the Aryans that had to deal with India in the first place. And they always show them with blue eyes, and they're pale, and they've got their little jowls and stuff. Well, if you look up Menes, the very first dynasty of Egypt, it actually has, let me see if I can do this real quick for you. Menes. It's Menes, Egypt. We'll try that. And then I'll look at images here. And you look at images for the pharaoh Menes, and in his tomb they found a whole bunch of these. And of course, black people are saying, oh, they're black, that's Caucasoid and stuff. But King Menes, actually, they found the statue now of him holding his hands. They're not going to show it here. Of him holding his hands whenever he was dead. And that he's a Caucasoid with, Caucasian features, and his skin still even line. You see this. But he's holding his hands in this position. And then there's a statue that they found now, and they say this is him. That this whole thing about these were all just the scribes and guys. I mean, look at the hat. That's not the hat he wore. That's the hat that the commoners wore. And so these were like in the tomb as the extras that they always had, and that man, they're not showing the picture I'm talking about. But it has this look to it that is exactly like the Sumerian kings. Princes. It looks just like that picture that you saw there. It's in my other video because I had one. It's a Sumerian priest, because in that they actually show it. In that one, it's the first one. Here it is. So they have a statue like this that's of Menes, and it's got a scratch on it. It tells you it's Menes on it, but what they have of the King Menes, it's all eroded away real bad because it's been exposed, and the arms are broke off right here and here and right here and here, and so you have this little chunk that would be his hand stuck to his belly, which that's still fused there. They just cut out around it, right, when they make it. And then it shows the blocky beard and those freaky eyes that they have on all those Sumerian guys. And it's Do 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 do. It's very indicative of all the Sumerian guys that have this same hand posture from that same era, the oldest and earliest ages that they have. So quite unique. But so I guess one more thing before we close here. Egyptian blonde red hair. And well, I put bland red here, didn't I? Bland. Let's go with blonde. Probably be a little bit easier. So they show you a lot of things like Ramses, whenever they get him and they're actually taking a hair sample off of him legally. Wow, where is that going? There we go. Is it not going to let me? Wow. That went weird. It put it in the middle. I'm sorry, guys. Let's try that again. Ta-da. Now explode. There you go. So he's got red blonde hair. I'm pretty sure you can pick that up in that. And they took a lock of it and they had it DNA sampled. And it comes out to, he hid the samples forever, but it comes out to Northern European. Right? Ramses, all these guys. The smiling mummy, where she's got this light auburn brown hair. Doesn't she look content? They did a few of these mummies real good where they look like they were smiling, you know. I don't know if anybody would want their grandma smiling, maybe having a content look, maybe not smiling. Even these ones that are like this, where they say that had to be African because she's got a hoop earring, they say, no, look at the hair sample and the facial structure. It's not. And it's not just old dynasty, it's first dynasty. And all the way through. Here's Ramses himself. And that he's got blonde curly hair that really looks a lot like the blonde curly hair of the Greek statues. And all the blue-eyed gods of antiquity. And Nefertiti had blue eyes. And you look at that, and that's got to be a Caucasoid look. In fact, all these look like Caucasoid look. Even the one that's black right here is just made out of black stone, and it's got blue eyes set into it. And these are fake wigs. Everybody knows they're fake wigs. Look, she's got real hair up under her fake wig because they had a lash problem. Yep. So how does that end racism? Well, that just proves to you that black people were never Egyptians. You can look at the DNA evidence they have now. Look up red and blonde Egyptians and look at some of these videos. And these are made by scientists. If you had a black scientist in there, he'd be having to tell you the same thing. Some people say that's why you don't see a black Egyptologist, because once they get into it and realize that they can't go Afrocentric with it, that they're not going to do it. That could be true, it may not. But look at the DNA samples on this that they have of each one of them and see that they know that it's Northern Europeans. And they say what happened is the Egyptians left and turned into the Europeans whenever the land was turning into a wasteland after that smallpox crap that ran through before. In fact, smallpox pharaoh. Here, let me show you one last thing on the way out. They have found smallpox on a pharaoh that they date to that same age. And it's here. And the face of the pharaoh here, there's whole articles on this, but that is actually a pockmark on a pharaoh right there of smallpox. And the fact that he had had smallpox back whenever it had broken out there before, and that it wasn't a breakout like this that could actually get to the point of taking your life, that was actually just a smaller, lesser breakout, but yet he still got it. So, yeah, look up smallpox and things and see, yeah, there you go. So racism gets to end in America now because blacks can quit hating on whitey. Well, they're still going to hate you because of the slave thing. We had nothing to do with the slave thing. The slave trade was all Jewish slave trade. Jewish slave trade. It's all Jewish private-owned ships and slave trades. You can't tell the difference between a white and a Jewish person? It's all from there. Look what this guy says. Do this yourself. I don't want you to, you can quit being racist. Stop for just a minute being racist, and then just try to figure all out if you're yelling about the right thing. Okay? Let's go one more thing. Let's look up. We thought they were white. An article I found by a brother here, believe it or not. This guy, Darnell. And he's got articles all on this where we thought they were white. And he explains to you that. So I want y'all to read this article and find it yourself. Look up Dontel Jackson or We Thought We Were White. Hello and welcome to my website, We Thought We Were White. My name is Dontel Jackson. And like many African Americans, I was brought up in a culture deeply infused with propaganda designed to lay the blame for all the black race ills on the white man. It was not until I began looking into the actual history of blacks, whites, and other races in America that I came to realize that many, if not most, of the resentment that African Americans harbor regarding our long history of abuse and exploitation has been intentionally misdirected by those who are most responsible for it, to shift the blame away from themselves as a people and to the white race, who they regard as their enemies. The reality is the white race had little to do with the slave trade that took our ancestors away from Africa and sold them into bondage into the New World, that crime was committed not by white Europeans, but by Jews who were engaged in transatlantic commerce between the Old World and the Americas, where they hoped to establish a new Jerusalem for which they were going to rule the world. And right now, the new Zionist movement by the black Hebrew Israelites actually panders exactly into their hands, making it happen. Isn't that wonderful? And now, I want you to read this article yourself. It is called We Thought They Were White by an educated brother named Dontel Jackson, who actually put down that racist book of his father's and picked up other books that were non-racist to find out the truth of humanity. And isn't that incredible? And so now we can end racism and quit acting about meanie, meanie, whitey, because read this article. Figure it all out. Figure it all out from there. Yeah. So that ought to do it. Smallpox, Jewish slave trips. Bam. Peace out. Appreciate y'all. Like and sub me. More new knowledge to come.